The forced bride hid her tears beneath her veil. The cowboy lifted it and whispered her name. Amina stood in front of the small, cracked mirror, brushing her long, dark hair until it shone in the morning light. Her hands were trembling slightly, not from excitement, but from fear. Today was supposed to be her wedding day, yet she felt no joy. Instead, a heavy weight pressed on her chest, one that had grown heavier with every passing week. She wore a dress of pure white, soft and flowing, but the fabric felt like chains around her body. The veil, delicate and almost transparent, rested lightly on her head, but it could not hide the sadness in her heart. Beneath it, her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Her mother entered the room quietly, her steps slow and careful, as if she were tiptoeing around Amina's grief. "You look beautiful," she said softly, smoothing a stray lock of hair from Amina's face. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes betrayed a mix of worry and resignation. Amina gave her a small, forced smile. She knew her mother meant well, but neither of them could escape the reality of the situation. This marriage was not about love. It was about duty, about tradition, about keeping the family afloat when money was tight and pride was at stake. Amina's father had arranged this marriage months ago, choosing a man from the city who was wealthy and respected, but far older than Amina. She had met him only a few times, and each meeting had left her feeling smaller, less important, like she was nothing more than an object being passed along. Her thoughts flickered to him now, sitting in a distant hall, waiting to claim a life he did not know. She swallowed hard, trying to push away the nausea that rose in her throat. Outside, the morning sun shone brightly over the dusty streets of the small town. Children laughed as they chased each other along the lanes, dogs barked in the distance, and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery drifted in through the windows. Life seemed normal, almost cheerful, yet inside the small house, Amina felt trapped. She wanted to scream, to run, to disappear into the horizon beyond the hills, but her feet were rooted to the floor. She was bound by duty, by expectation, and by fear. Her best friend, Layla, entered the room carrying a small box of jewelry. "You'll need these," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Layla had grown up with Amina, sharing secrets, dreams, and fears. Now she watched helplessly as her friend faced a future she had not chosen. "Do you have to go through with it?" Layla asked quietly, her eyes brimming with concern. Amina looked at her friend, her heart aching. I don't have a choice," she whispered. She had wanted to tell her mother and father how she felt, but words had never been enough. They had listened politely, nodding and smiling, but the answer was always the same. This marriage had to happen. Her protest would not change anything. She had learned long ago that her voice was small against the walls of tradition. She took the jewelry from Layla, tiny gold earrings, and a delicate necklace. Each piece seemed to sparkle with a freedom she could not claim. She tried to focus on their beauty, imagining for a moment a life where she could wear them by choice, where her smile could be genuine. But the veil on her head reminded her that today she had no choice. She tucked the earrings into her ears, fastening the necklace around her neck, feeling the weight of each piece settle against her chest. The sound of horses outside startled her, and she pressed her hands to her lap. The wedding hall was filling up with guests, townsfolk who had come to witness the event. Some were curious, others sympathetic, and some were judgmental. She could feel their eyes, imagining them dissecting her face, searching for a hint of rebellion, a trace of joy, or a spark of defiance. But she offered none. She sat quietly, folding her hands on her lap, and let the veil hide her face. It was her shield, her silent protector, allowing her a private world where her tears remained unseen. Amina's thoughts drifted to her childhood, to simpler days when she ran barefoot through fields of wildflowers, laughing without care, dreaming of a life full of possibility. She remembered hiding from her father's stern gaze when she disobeyed him as a child, imagining that one day she would be free to choose her own path. But that freedom felt like a story from another lifetime, distant and unreachable. Now she was an adult, yet the choices she had dreamed of were slipping away, replaced by a contract signed in someone else's favor. The door creaked open, and her younger brother, Sami, peeked inside. His eyes were wide, filled with worry, and he held a small bouquet of flowers clutched to his chest. "Sister," he whispered, stepping closer. "Are you okay?" His voice was soft, almost pleading. Amina forced a smile, brushing his hand gently. "I'll be okay," she said, though even she did not believe it. Sami reached out and touched the veil, feeling the fabric that separated her from the world. "I'll miss you," he said, his voice breaking. Tears pricked Amina's eyes, and she quickly looked away, hoping he would not notice. The clock ticked slowly, each second heavier than the last. She could hear the distant murmur of voices, the shuffle of feet, the occasional laugh that grated against her nerves. It all seemed unreal, like a dream she could not wake from. Her stomach twisted as the moment drew nearer. Soon, she would walk down the aisle, place her hand in the grasp of a man she barely knew, and begin a life she had never imagined for herself. Her mother placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's time," she said softly. Amina nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She rose slowly, the fabric of her dress rustling softly as she moved. Each step toward the door felt like walking into a storm she could not escape. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, willing her legs to carry her forward. Outside the room, the hallway stretched ahead, lined with familiar faces. Each smile felt hollow, each nod a reminder that no one could change her fate. The sunlight streaming through the windows cast long shadows on the floor. Amina's heart raced as she stepped forward, her hands gripping the edge of her veil. She tried to remember the stories her grandmother had told her, tales of strength, courage, and perseverance. She drew a shaky breath, imagining that she could carry some of that strength with her, that she could survive this day without losing herself completely. As she approached the large doors of the hall, she paused for a moment, her hand hovering over the brass handle. Her reflection in the polished wood seemed like a stranger, a young woman dressed in white, eyes full of fear, yet holding a quiet determination. She forced herself to straighten her shoulders, lift her chin, and take the first step into the hall. The room fell silent as she entered, the guests turning their attention to her. She felt the weight of their gaze, some curious, some judgmental, some pitying. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she did not falter. She walked slowly, deliberately, each step echoing in the quiet space. The veil covered her face, hiding the tears that threatened to fall. She focused on the floor ahead, on the path she had to take, and not on the life that awaited her at the end of it. She reached the front of the hall where the man she was to marry waited. His eyes scanned her face, polite but detached, lacking the warmth she had once dreamed of in a partner. The officiant began speaking, and Amina's hands gripped the folds of her dress tightly. She could hear the words, feel the ritual, but her mind was elsewhere, on the open sky outside, on the fields she used to run through, on the life she might one day choose for herself. As the ceremony continued, she felt a quiet storm brewing inside her. Fear, sorrow, and longing battled against the calm exterior she had crafted. Every promise she was expected to make felt like a lie, every word she uttered heavy with pretense. Yet beneath her veil, she allowed herself a moment to dream, a fleeting hope that somehow, someway, she might find freedom, find love, find herself before it was too late. The morning sun was high in the sky, spilling warm light across the dusty town. But inside the wedding hall, the air felt heavy and still. Amina walked slowly down the aisle, her white dress swaying with each hesitant step, her hands clutching the delicate folds as if they could shield her from the future. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and longing. She could barely breathe, each heartbeat echoing like a drum in her ears. Suddenly, the doors at the far end of the hall creaked open. The sudden sound drew every eye in the room, and a hush fell over the gathered guests. Amina froze in place, her heart leaping into her throat. She turned slowly, trying to make sense of the interruption. A man stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, dust from the road still clinging to his boots and jacket. His hat was tipped slightly back, revealing sharp eyes that scanned the room with quiet intensity. He was unfamiliar to most of the townsfolk, yet something about him commanded attention, a calm authority and unspoken courage. Whispers ran through the crowd like wind through dry grass. "Who is he?" someone muttered. "A stranger," said another, eyes wide with curiosity. Amina's chest tightened. The man's gaze landed on her, and in that instant the world around her seemed to disappear. He looked directly into her eyes as if he could see the fear, the sorrow, the silent plea for escape that she had hidden beneath her veil. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She felt rooted to the spot, a mixture of relief and disbelief swirling in her chest. He took a step forward, and a murmur rippled through the guests. The officiant paused, eyebrows raised, clearly unsure whether to stop the ceremony. The man's voice, calm yet firm, broke the silence. "Amina," he said, just her name, but it carried an unexpected weight. The word seemed to reach inside her, stirring something she had thought buried: hope. Amina's hands shook. She did not recognize the voice. Yet somehow it felt familiar, as if it belonged to someone who understood her completely. Her eyes searched the room for the source of the sound, and then she saw him, the stranger, the man who had stepped through the doors with the confidence of someone who knew he was doing the right thing. Her heart skipped a beat. The guests whispered among themselves, some shocked, some amused, others judgmental. "Who is he to call her by name?" a woman hissed to her neighbor. "How dare he interrupt the ceremony?" another said, voice sharp with indignation, but the man did not speak to anyone but her. He ignored the gasps, the stares, the disapproval. His focus was entirely on Amina. Amina's mind raced. Who was he? How did he know her name? And why did she feel so drawn to him in that moment? Her chest tightened as fear and hope clashed within her. She had spent her life following rules, obeying expectations, never daring to act on her own desires. Yet now, here was a man who seemed to see through the veil she wore, both literally and figuratively. The stranger moved closer, and the murmurs in the hall grew louder. Some guests whispered warnings, urging her to ignore him, to continue the ceremony, to follow the path laid out for her. But Amina could not take her eyes off him. Something inside her urged her to listen, to trust, to let him in. She felt a flicker of courage she had not known she possessed. He stopped a few steps away, close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the determined set of his jaw, the quiet intensity that seemed to radiate from him. "Amina," he said again, softer this time, almost a whisper, yet it carried across the room as if the walls themselves wanted her to hear. Her heart fluttered uncontrollably, and she took a small, tentative step toward him, unsure if she was obeying her instincts or simply wishing it were a dream. The man's eyes did not waver. He lifted a hand slightly, as if to gesture reassurance, and in that single motion, Amina felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. She realized with a jolt that she trusted him. She did not know why, she did not understand how, but she did. Every other concern, the guests, her family, the ceremony, faded into the background. In that moment, it was only her and the stranger. The officiant cleared his throat, attempting to regain control of the ceremony, but the man did not flinch. His presence seemed to hold a quiet power that no one could ignore. He did not speak to the officiant, did not argue, did not demand attention. He simply focused on Amina, and that focus alone seemed to shift the atmosphere in the room. The whispers softened, the shuffling of feet slowed, and the weight of expectation that had pressed down on Amina all morning felt slightly lighter. Amina's hands, which had been tightly clasped together, relaxed a little. She could feel her pulse in her wrists, a steady reminder that she was alive, that she could still make choices. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her trembling lips. The veil over her face felt heavier now, not as a shield, but as a reminder that she had hidden herself for too long. Her heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, she did not have to hide anymore. The man took another step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't have to do this," he said softly, almost urgently. The words cut through the fog of fear that had clouded her mind. For the first time that morning, Amina felt a surge of hope. Someone was telling her she could choose, she could resist, she could take control of her life. The idea was terrifying yet liberating. Her thoughts flashed to her family, her parents who had acted out of duty, love, and fear. Her brother who had looked at her with worry that morning. Her best friend who had silently hoped for her freedom. Could she really defy them? Could she really step away from the life laid out for her? The stranger's calm, steady gaze seemed to answer for her. Yes, she could. The room was silent except for the soft rustle of Amina's dress as she shifted on her feet. She could feel every eye on her, could feel the weight of judgment and expectation pressing down. But the man's presence grounded her, gave her courage. It was as if he carried a piece of the world outside the hall, a world where choices were possible, where fear could be faced, where hope could blossom. Amina's fingers brushed the veil lightly, hesitating. It had protected her all her life, hidden her tears and her fears. But now she realized it was also a barrier between her and the possibility of freedom. Her heart raced as she slowly reached up and touched the edge of the veil, feeling the fine fabric slip through her fingers. She imagined lifting it, letting the world see her fully without disguise. The man, sensing her hesitation, did not move. He remained calm, patient, and unwavering. His presence was a quiet anchor in the storm of her emotions. "You're stronger than you know," he said, his voice gentle, almost a whisper again, yet it resonated in her chest. You don't have to stay where you're not wanted. You don't have to live a life someone else chooses for you. Amina's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to speak, to ask him who he was, why he cared, why he had come. But her voice felt fragile, like it might shatter if she tried. She nodded slightly, a small motion barely perceptible, but it was enough. Enough for the man to understand that she was listening, that she was considering, that she was ready to take the first step toward a life of her own. The guests were still watching, some with confusion, some with anger, some with curiosity. But Amina no longer noticed them. She no longer noticed the ceremony, the expectations, or the tradition. Her world had narrowed to a single point, the man who had appeared in the doorway and whispered her name. Slowly, carefully, she lifted the veil. The fabric slipped away from her face, and in that instant she felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. Her eyes met his again, and for a heartbeat the room disappeared. There was only her and him, and the possibility of a different future, one where she could be seen for who she truly was, not what she had been forced to become. The man smiled faintly, a reassuring gesture that made her chest swell with something she had not felt in a long time, hope. The heat in her cheeks was not from embarrassment, but from the realization that she had a choice. She could stay, follow the path laid out before her, or she could step away, step into the unknown and claim her freedom. Amina's heart beat faster as the choice became clear. She could no longer pretend that her life belonged to anyone else. She could no longer hide behind expectations, tradition, or fear. For the first time that day, she felt the stirring of courage, quiet but insistent. She took a small, careful step toward him, letting the world fall away behind her. And as she did, the first whispers of possibility floated through her mind. A life of her own, a life she could choose, a life where her heart could guide her. The man remained still, patient, waiting for her, as if the universe itself had paused to give her this moment. Amina's heart pounded so loudly she feared it might echo through the silent hall. Every eye in the room seemed to be on her, yet she hardly noticed them. All she could see was the stranger, the man who had appeared out of nowhere and whispered her name. His eyes held something she had never experienced before: recognition, understanding, and a gentle insistence that she was not trapped by the life forced upon her. He stepped closer, each movement slow and deliberate, calm in a room full of confusion and murmurs. The guests shifted in their seats, unsure how to react. Some leaned forward, curiosity battling judgment. Others whispered to their neighbors, voices low but urgent. "Who is he?" one woman hissed. "How dare he interrupt the wedding?" But the man ignored them. His focus was entirely on Amina, and in that focus she found a strange kind of comfort. Her hands, which had been clasped tightly at her sides, loosened slightly. She could feel her pulse in her wrists, a steady, insistent reminder that she was alive, that she had the power to act. She had spent years bending to the will of others, hiding her emotions, obeying the rules laid down by her family, society, and tradition. But now here was a man who seemed to see through every veil she had worn, literal and metaphorical, and he was giving her permission to be herself. "Amina," he said again, softer this time, but there was urgency in his tone. "You don't have to do this. You don't have to marry someone you don't love. You don't have to live a life someone else chooses for you." The words were simple, yet they struck her like a lightning bolt. Her chest tightened and her throat burned with emotion. She had longed for freedom in silence, had dreamed of choice in secret, but hearing it spoken aloud by someone she did not know, someone who had come to stand for her, was overwhelming. Tears pricked her eyes, threatening to spill. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold them back, but the veil, once a shield, now felt like a cage. The man lifted his hand slightly, a small, reassuring gesture. His calmness grounded her, made her feel as though she could breathe again after holding her fear for so long. Slowly trembling, she reached up to the veil. Her fingers brushed the delicate fabric. It was soft, almost fragile, yet it had hidden her for years, hidden her pain, her dreams, and the fire that now stirred within her. She hesitated. The guests watched silently, the tension in the room thick enough to touch. Amina could feel their stares like a weight pressing down on her shoulders, but the stranger's gaze never wavered. His presence told her that she did not need their approval, that she did not need to follow the rules that had kept her small. She could step forward, and for the first time in her life, truly act for herself. Slowly, carefully, she lifted the veil. The soft fabric slipped from her face, revealing her eyes wide, bright, and full of emotion. The guests gasped, some in shock, some in admiration. For a brief moment, silence filled the hall, broken only by the quickened beating of her heart. She met the stranger's eyes, and in that instant everything else faded away. The man smiled faintly, just enough to show kindness without arrogance. He did not reach for her, did not speak a command or a demand. He simply waited, patient and steady, as if understanding that the moment belonged to her. His eyes held a quiet strength that drew her in, a reassurance that she could take this step, that she could choose her own path, even if the world around her demanded obedience. Amina felt a tremor run through her body. Fear, hope, excitement, and doubt collided inside her, making her chest ache. Could she really do this? Could she truly defy the expectations of her family, her town, and tradition? The thought was terrifying, yet the man's steady gaze and calm presence made the impossibility seem possible. She could feel a spark of courage igniting in her chest, small but persistent, ready to grow into a flame. Her eyes wandered to the man she was supposed to marry. He was waiting, polite but detached, a stranger who expected compliance. He did not know her, did not care about her dreams, and would never see her as more than a duty fulfilled. Her heart recoiled at the thought of placing her hand in his, of surrendering herself to a life that offered no warmth, no love, no freedom. The decision became suddenly, undeniably clear. I can't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It was not a declaration to anyone but herself, yet the words hung in the air like a storm about to break. She took a tentative step toward the stranger. Each movement was deliberate, a statement of intent. Her chest swelled with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The guests leaned forward in their seats, some shocked, some incredulous, but she no longer saw them. They were background noise to the life-altering choice she was making. The stranger's smile widened slightly, a quiet encouragement, a mirror to the hope she felt blossoming inside her. "It's okay," he said softly. "You can choose, you have the right to your own life, you are stronger than you realize." Amina's breath came faster. The words, the presence, the very act of being seen for who she truly was overwhelmed her. She could feel tears sliding down her cheeks, hot and real, but they were no longer hidden in shame. They were her own, proof of her courage, proof that she could finally claim herself. She reached out slowly, cautiously, and took his hand. The touch was grounding, warm, and real. Amina felt a wave of relief wash over her, a sense of safety she had never known before. The world around her seemed to shift, the oppressive weight of obligation lifting slightly with each heartbeat. She could feel her strength returning, a confidence she had not realized she possessed. For the first time, she felt that the future could belong to her and not to anyone else. The man nodded slightly, his eyes gentle and steady. He did not speak more words because none were needed. His presence, his calm confidence, and the simple act of holding her hand spoke volumes. It was a silent promise that he would stand by her, that she would not be alone, that the choices she made from this point forward were hers and hers alone. The older man, the one she was supposed to marry, finally spoke. His voice was sharp, demanding explanation, but the stranger's calm gaze silenced him. There was no anger, no confrontation, just quiet strength. He did not yell or threaten. He simply stood, a pillar of patience and integrity, letting Amina find her voice. Amina swallowed hard, drawing strength from the man's steadiness. She lifted her chin, straightened her shoulders, and spoke clearly, audibly, her voice shaking but firm. I cannot go through with this marriage." The words rang through the hall, startling the guests. Murmurs ran through the crowd, some approving, some scandalized, some incredulous. But she ignored them. The words felt like a weight lifting from her chest, like a chain breaking, like freedom beginning to bloom. The stranger squeezed her hand gently, a silent gesture of solidarity. She realized then that she was no longer afraid. The courage she had felt flickering inside her all morning had ignited, and she could face whatever came next. She could face judgment, anger, or disappointment, because at last she had chosen herself. Tears streamed freely down her face now, but they were tears of relief, hope, and determination. She looked at the stranger, at the man who had stepped into her life and given her the courage to act. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking, but full of gratitude and newfound strength. He nodded, a soft smile playing on his lips. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You found the strength inside yourself. I just reminded you it was there." Amina felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a deep, unshakable confidence she had never known. For the first time in her life, she understood that she could stand tall, make choices, and shape her own future. The veil, once a symbol of concealment, was now gone, revealing her fully, her emotions, her courage, and her resolve. The room remained silent for a few moments, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then whispers began to ripple through the guests, surprise, admiration, and even respect mixing with disbelief. Amina no longer noticed them. She was no longer the girl trapped by expectations. She was a woman taking her first steps toward freedom. The stranger, still holding her hand, gave her a small nod. Together they moved toward the doors of the hall, the sunlight spilling over them, warm and bright. Each step felt lighter than the last, as if the act of choosing had lifted an invisible weight from her shoulders. Amina knew the path ahead would not be easy. There would be questions, challenges, and perhaps anger from those who did not understand. But she no longer feared it. She had found her voice, her courage, and the reminder that she could shape her own destiny. As they reached the doors, the wind outside lifted gently, carrying the scent of fields, open skies, and possibility. Amina breathed deeply, feeling the first true taste of freedom in her life. She squeezed the stranger's hand, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged in courage, trust, and understanding. The world was wide, open, and full of choices, and for the first time she could step forward without fear. The sunlight outside the wedding hall felt warmer than Amina had ever noticed before. Each ray of light touched her skin like a gentle promise, a quiet reminder that the world was bigger than fear, bigger than tradition, and bigger than expectation. She squeezed the stranger's hand, Jack, she learned his name was, and felt a strange mix of relief, exhilaration, and hope. For the first time in her life, she realized she was truly free to make her own choices. As they stepped out of the hall, the murmurs of the guests followed them. Some whispered judgments, others disbelief, and a few, surprisingly, admiration. Amina hardly noticed them. Their voices were distant, like echoes from another world. All that mattered now was the path ahead, open and waiting. The dusty road stretched before them, bathed in golden sunlight, lined by fields that seemed to shimmer with possibility. Jack led her gently toward his horse, tied to a post near the edge of the hall. He did not rush, did not pull, did not push. He simply guided her with steady hands and quiet reassurance. Amina's heart raced as she looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude, fear, and the excitement of stepping into the unknown. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. His voice was calm, patient, and filled with a kindness that made her feel safe. Amina nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm sure I want to leave." Her voice was shaky, but there was conviction behind it now. The words felt powerful as they left her lips, each syllable breaking the weight of years of expectation and silence. She had spoken her truth, and it had freed her. Jack smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both encouragement and relief. He helped her mount the horse carefully, ensuring she was steady and comfortable. She felt the warmth of his hand on her back, grounding her in the moment, reminding her that she was not alone. The townsfolk watched, some in shock, some in awe, but Amina no longer cared. She had chosen herself, and that choice was stronger than any whisper of judgment or tradition. The horse began to move slowly at first, then picked up a steady rhythm along the dusty road. Amina's dress fluttered in the wind, and she felt the sunlight on her face, tasting the first real breath of freedom she had ever known. Every step, every sway of the horse felt like a declaration, a statement that she was no longer bound by fear, no longer silenced by obligation, no longer hidden behind a veil. As they rode, Amina's mind wandered to her family. Her parents, who had acted out of love, fear, and duty, might be angry, confused, or hurt. Her brother, Sami, would worry, yet perhaps he would understand in time. And Layla, her best friend, would be proud, though she could not yet know what courage it took to step into the unknown. Amina realized that freedom was not without its consequences, but it was worth every risk. She had claimed her life, and that claim could not be taken away. Jack rode beside her, quiet and attentive, matching his pace to hers. The wind rustled through his hair, and his calm presence was a steady reassurance. They rode in silence for a while, not out of discomfort, but because words were unnecessary. Each heartbeat, each breath, each glance carried meaning. Amina felt a connection she had never known, not just to Jack, but to herself, to the possibility of a life she could shape on her own. The road stretched on, leading them out of the town, past fields and meadows, where wildflowers nodded in the breeze and birds sang freely in the trees. Amina felt a sense of wonder she had not felt in years, a reminder that life could be beautiful, unexpected, and full of promise. The horizon seemed endless, and for the first time she imagined herself moving toward it with hope instead of fear. Jack finally spoke, his voice gentle and calm. "Where do you want to go?" he asked. There was no demand in his tone, no expectation, just a simple question, a choice. Amina realized that the question was not only about the path they would ride, but about the life she wanted to live. She thought for a moment, letting the wind carry away the last traces of fear. "I don't know," she admitted, but her voice was steady. Somewhere we can start over, somewhere I can be free to make my own choices." Her heart fluttered as she spoke, and she felt a thrill at the thought of a life not dictated by others. Jack nodded, understanding. "Then that's where we'll go," he said. And with that, they rode onward, leaving the town, the hall, and the expectations behind. The world ahead was uncertain, but it was theirs to explore. Each step of the horse, each beat of Amina's heart, carried them closer to a future filled with possibility. As the sun climbed higher, painting the sky with shades of gold and amber, Amina felt tears sliding down her cheeks, not of sadness, but of relief and joy. She had taken her first steps toward freedom, and with each passing moment the weight of the past seemed to lift. The veil that had hidden her sorrow was gone, replaced by courage, hope, and determination. She glanced at Jack, who rode beside her with quiet strength, and felt a surge of gratitude. He had not forced her, not commanded her, not judged her. He had simply been there, patient and steadfast, a reminder that courage could be found in unexpected places, and that sometimes all it took to change a life was a single act of support and trust. The fields stretched out endlessly before them, golden and green under the bright sun. The air smelled of earth and flowers, of life growing wild and free. Amina breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the scent of possibility, letting it anchor her in the moment. Each breath was a reminder that she was alive, that she was choosing, that she was free. They rode for hours, the town disappearing behind a ridge, replaced by forests, streams, and open plains. Amina felt a sense of exhilaration and peace she had never known. The freedom she had imagined in secret for so long was finally real. She could walk, run, laugh, and live without fear. She could make decisions for herself. She could dream without limits. Jack finally slowed the horse as they reached a small clearing by a river. The water glimmered in the sunlight and wildflowers swayed gently in the breeze. He dismounted first and offered his hand to Amina. She took it, stepping down carefully, her feet touching the soft grass. The sound of the river, the birds, and the wind created a peaceful symphony that seemed to welcome her into a new life. Amina looked around, letting the beauty of the place sink in. It was simple, quiet, and free. No walls, no expectations, no judgment. Just the earth, the sky, and the promise of a life she could live fully on her own terms. She turned to Jack, a smile spreading across her face, radiant and unguarded. For the first time in years, she felt completely herself. Jack smiled back, a gentle, approving smile. "This is just the beginning," he said softly. Amina nodded, feeling the truth in his words. They had left behind the constraints of tradition and expectation, and ahead of them lay a world they could shape together or apart, filled with choices, hope, and possibility. She took a deep breath, letting the wind play through her hair, feeling the sun on her face. Her heart, once heavy with fear and sorrow, now felt light, full of energy, and ready for the future. She had stepped into the unknown and claimed her freedom. The past was behind her, and the future, bright, open, and full of hope, stretched endlessly before her. For the first time, Amina laughed, a clear, joyful sound that rang through the clearing, echoed by the birds and the rustling trees. It was a laugh of liberation, of courage, of life reclaimed. Jack joined in, and together they stood in the sunlight, two souls at the beginning of a journey neither could have predicted, but both were ready to embrace. The river sparkled like liquid diamonds, the fields stretched endlessly, and the sky promised new beginnings. Amina knew the road ahead would have challenges, but she was no longer afraid. She had found her voice, her courage, and her power. She had chosen herself. And as she stood there hand in hand with Jack, Amina understood that freedom was not just a destination. It was a journey, one she would walk with strength, hope, and determination. The veil was gone. The tears had been shed. The choice had been made. She was finally truly free.